We are live.
Okay, live Senate Appropriations, February 20th. We're going through the FY26 budget request. And today we have Forest Parks and Recreation. And I'll let you introduce yourselves.
Great.
And we can introduce ourselves if you don't know everybody.
I think I do.
Okay.
You good? Yeah. So Danielle Fitzko, I'm the Commissioner of Forest Parks and Recreation.
Nancy Bloomer, I'm the Director of Finance and Administration. Nice to meet you.
Thank you for having us here to share our budget. I think we'll follow a very similar format to the rest of the Agency of Natural Resources, where
I'm on it. Right here.
yeah, we'll give you a little bit about, I think you all probably know a lot about FPR, but recognizing it's the beginning of the biennium, we'll just give you a brief overview of FPR, meet the team, overview of our budget, some key changes from the previous year, some significant initiatives and challenges that we see, and then we have time if you're into the weeds of it, we have a budget development board. So I say this all the time, we're so fortunate that our name kind of tells you what we do. We're forest. 76% of the state is forested. We like to say we're forest strong. Our work across all landowner types is to keep Vermont's forests forested, healthy, resilient, and sustainably managed. We have a wonderful team of 8 programs in the division, and I can go a little bit more into those. We are Vermont State Parks, 55 parks all across the state in many rural communities. We like to say that most Vermonters are 20 minutes away from the state park. We've welcomed over 1 million visitors this past couple of years, which is amazing. And we have great memories for both Vermonters and visitors. And we're outdoor recreation, which is just continues to increase in popularity, demand on the land, and really an economic engine for the state. That's FPR. This organizational chart gives you kind of the high level of how we're organized. On here, you'll see Principal Assistant Kate Everly. She's not here today, but she's here a lot in the State House. She's our Legislative Affairs and Communications. If you don't know her, I can introduce you to her, but if you need something FPR, I'm not here. She's the person to grab. We have the 3 programmatic divisions. There's Forest, Director Oliver Pearson. There's State Parks, which is Directors Nate McKean. Lands Administration and Recreation, our Director Becca Washburn. And Nancy Bloomer, our amazing Business Office Manager. Year round, we have about 135 staff, but we really blow up, as you can imagine, in the summer season. When we're operating 55 state parks, we bring on about 450 seasonals, which is, we're in it right now. It's a huge amount of work, but so valuable. We like to say it's a great workforce development tool. We bring people to Vermont, they come try Vermont, and many times they stay. A lot of our staff in state parks started as seasonals. I think actually, now that I think about it, both Becca and Nate started as seasonals at Little River State Park. And now they're directors in FPR, which is awesome.
How many would you say come back every year? That 450?
At least half, I would say. Yeah. And it's kind of like you have the older end that people have retired and they come back, and then we bring a lot of like younger college age students, and a lot of times maybe it's their first job.
And so you're promoting out of state for those jobs?
Mm-hmm. We promote widely, yeah. And as part of it, in order to run state parks, a lot of it's housing. Realize where you have campsites, it's 24/7, so people need to be on site. So that's just part of sort of that infrastructure needs within state parks, is that you've got to provide housing. A lot of times now we're thinking RV hookups in the future. A lot of people have RVs. So our forestry division is actually our biggest division with year-round staff. And we do everything from forest health, monitoring the health of our forests. We even get up in a plane every year to see what's going on. We also have a wildland fire team. It's small, it's only 3 people. It used to only be 2 people at 20% time, but we've recognized sort of the challenges and risks ahead. And I'm sure you knew this past fall was pretty heavy, like wildland fire season for Vermont. We had responded to 9 fires. And so we're working to increase our capacity there. And we really support municipalities, and we're also able to bring in resources from neighboring states and Quebec. We have a private lands program that works with the 80% of private landowners in Vermont that own forest land, and mainly they do a lot of the use value current use appraisal program. We have an urban and community forestry program. If you look outside, that's urban forestry in downtowns. And forest economy, a small forest economy program that really works to support a private sector. which is really actually a really big boom in Vermont. I would say boom, it's suffering, but it's $2.1 billion economic activity a year, probably not recognize the value that it does have. And then we have watershed forestry program. So that's team forestry. Our state parks, as I mentioned, 55 across the state. We bring in over 1 million visitors during the operating season, but if we look at year round, I mean, our state parks right now are busy. You know, a lot of people are still accessing them. We are the third biggest infrastructure asset holder for the state with over $280 million in infrastructure. People don't realize with like 39 campgrounds, beaches, toilet buildings, under, wastewater systems, potable water systems. It's a really big facility that we manage. When we're actually busy on a weekend, it is like the biggest municipality in the state, like 40,000 to 50,000 people. So imagine taking that big and but it's just dispersed all across the state. And then we have lands administration and recreation, which has kind of 3 buckets. One is outdoor rec, which we provide a lot of grants out to municipalities and nonprofits. We have a land conservation arm, whether it's going to be land that we provide to the state portfolio that we manage for Vermonters or easements on private land. And then we have our state lands planning and planning arm and land records. So that's sort of the programmatic divisions. Now I can kind of get into our budget. If you look at this slide, this really shows you where the funds go based on programmatic areas. The biggest bucket is state parks at around $19 million. Most of that is revenue for that is mostly in park special fund, which is, you think about admissions into state parks and what we sell in ski leases, which are really important. Then the next biggest bucket is land administration. That looks big because that's our land. That's where our land conservation funds go. We bring a lot of money in from the federal government to help us conserve land, like the Forest Legacy Program. Outdoor recreation is big too because we also pass through a lot of funds there as well. Land and Water Conservation Fund, Rec Trails Program, right back out to communities. And then sort of the bottom right-hand side, the smaller blocks are really just the different programs within the division.
So the forest products is the smallest?
It is the smallest, and we really need to grow that program. And I'll be frank, we only have 2 people in that program. We had 3, but we moved one to the business office because they were in desperate need of building that team up. We're looking at how we can support forest economy, but it is small.
And what's UC?
Urban and community forestry. That's small too.
I'm impressed you saw Proj and were able to figure out what that was.
A little connection there.
Yes, a big connection there. So FCO's total budget is $54.8 million. Of that, about $3.3 million, or roughly 6%, is for the administration. Forestry is about $13.5 million, which is about 25% of the budget. Parks is $19.2 million, 35% of the budget, and the Division of Lands Administration and Recreation is 18.5, roughly 33% of the budget. So our total budget is an increase of $7.1 million over FY25, and of that increase, the general fund portion is about just north of 1.5 million, and the remaining is spread across federal, special, and interdepartmental funds. The general fund increase is primarily due to increase in benefits costs, about $678,000 over last year. Other increases are due to staff salary increases, internal service funds, overhead fixed costs, and every single year, say it over and over again, inflation. So federal, and I do have a slide that will really focus in on federal here in a minute, but just high level, our federal funds have increased by about $4 million, primarily due to new U.S. Forest Service, NBRC, Northern Borders Regional Commission, and Land Water Conservation Funds, but also some core funding for the Federal Highway Administration, which is our Rec Trails program. Our expenditures are increased, generally associated with land transactions and an increase in subrecipient grants. And then again, we'll get into a little more detail on federal here in just a moment. But our Park Special Fund would appear to be a decrease. However, in FY25, we budgeted for a $1.2 million landing craft, which is a boat that takes you out to the islands. And so our budget for parks is actually an increase of $550,000 over last year. And that's really because over the last 5 years, I did analysis that showed that our expenses for parks has gone up 34% over 5 years. So a huge increase. Our other special funds have slightly increased due to a strategic reinvestment in our land facilities trust fund, and then also for planned spending in our land acquisition fund. And for interdepartmental, we have a new MOU with ACD for 3 projects and $5 million, and those projects are
these funds are directed to outdoor recreation access. So there's Bigham Falls in Stowe is a very popular waterfall recreation spot that's loved, and we're going to be investing in helping to meet the needs of the people, which is more parking, toilet, kiosks, trails, and sometimes when we have a lot of people using, we need to harden up sometimes the landscape so that they can be safe and we protect the resources. Another one is we have 8 fire towers on state lands that date back to the early 1900s, and we've been working with the historic preservation engineer to make them safe and protect them. So 2 fire towers will get rehabbed, and the last one is some investment in Smuggler's Notch corridor on the Stowe side to help manage parking, stormwater management, and access to the outdoors.
And the last thing I'll just point out, because the slide is always a little bit misleading, is that personnel service includes contracted services, which is the bulk of what that increase is. We have a lot of increased contracts this year.
One thing, go ahead.
I was gonna say overall, it's like a 12% increase.
From 1% divided by, yeah,
54.
54.
And most of the increases being supported by federal funds.
Right.
General fund, there's no one-time request or any additional programming or base funding increases for us. Anything that's new in general funds is just meeting the upward pressures that we have.
So it's like, because the governor was trying to get everybody to do 3%. So I was wondering if you were at 3% with the state funds, but you know, we weren't.
It was really trying to meet our, the healthcare personnel costs and the internal services funds. We just couldn't meet it with 3%. We are very heavy on personnel. So we really have nowhere to cut.
We also have a lot of federal funds.
You're up $4 million and your increase is 7, and 4 of it's the federal funds.
Correct.
And the federal, and could you repeat just again? I didn't hear it all. The federal funds is going where?
She's going to talk. Well,
Yeah.
it's up next.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Thank you for the prompt.
yes, and the next slide, federal funds. So federal funds equate to about 33% of our total budget. Our federal funds are U.S. Forest Service Lands Water Conservation Fund, Federal Highway Administration, Northern Borders Regional Commission, and then we also have FEMA funds and American Rescue Plan Act or ARPA funds. And then, yeah, the FEMA ones for the last 2 floods. And so where the dollars, the upcoming federal funds is generally going is primarily for land acquisitions and subrecipient awards, so grants out to communities and to municipalities. But we have about a portfolio of about $50 million in federal funding right now. Of that, about 38 million is unexpended, meaning we have still yet to spend, so we spent down roughly 12 of our $50 million. We currently have 147 subrecipient awards going out to communities communities and to nonprofits, municipalities. And then we have approximately 5 million still outstanding from communities that are still working on projects. So committed funds that are essentially a liability. Do you have more questions about it?
So I can't really see from this the $4 million that's the increase in federal funds.
This is our full let me go back up one. This is the full portfolio, which spans many, many years. So that you can see down underneath funds, the federal funds, the 3.
These are going to go up.
So Land and Water Conservation Fund has increased. We have grants that we receive from the Forest Service from Inflation Reduction Act that would help work with private landowners for forest resiliency strategies. $5.5 million there. Not all in this budget, spanned over a couple of years. I think those would be the 2 primary sources of the increase.
Okay.
And Forest Legacy, land acquisition. And then, oh, that's right. We have
in Forest Legacy, is that where you're buying?
Correct.
Okay.
Goes to land acquisition. And they also had a huge infusion with IRA Inflation Reduction Act funds that we're always very successful. We put up projects, and we have like 3 on the docket right now that we got with IRA funds, which we're watching very closely with the uncertainty right now in the federal climate. So we're drawing down as quickly as we can and moving strategically where we know we could be at risk. And we hope we solve them great. Any more questions on the federal side? Okay. This is some changes that we want to just kind of flag. Vermont State Parks, as Angela's already mentioned, that we are seeing this huge increase. It's overall just personnel increase. There's the services, like when we're contracting out, an example, in Maidstone State Park up in the Northeast Kingdom, it now costs us $40,000 to remove trash. So it's just increasing. We buy fire, we try and harvest firewood where we can, but we buy a lot of firewood. That's all gone up. Toilet paper's gone up. I don't know why I say toilet paper. It's not that I do.
You buy a lot.
I bet you do.
So that's just the reality. Our internal services fund has increased this year, particularly $450,000. That's insurance, because we have all those buildings, and that's insurance for that. So it's just a huge increase for us. Flag that. Economic Development Authority, we mentioned this already. Those are those 3 recreation access areas where we're working on. We're excited about those. We have an increase in clean water funding in 2 areas. We have received funds for years to build really skidder bridges, which are portable bridges that are used on forestry operations. When you want to cross over a stream, you put these temporary bridges down and they can be removed. Turns out our large steel bridges became very useful after the floods when municipalities they lost a bridge, so we've loaned them out to municipalities and they need them long term, like 2 years. So clean water funding is helping us build more bridges, increase our inventory, but also they'll be available for municipalities if needed. And then we also use clean water funds to help us improve our road system on state land. We have 600 miles of roads. We strategically identified a road erosion inventory where we need to put those practices, and we put those dollars where they're needed to improve water quality. I think that's all hand up.
Yes, I was just curious, out of the Economic Development Authority funds, $2 million, what are those improvements and what are the 3 access areas? Do you know how?
Yes, I shared that and I'm happy to share it again. Bigham Falls and Stowe, a high use popular recreation area, will get some infrastructure improvements like increased parking, hardening all the trails where we have some erosion issues, toilets and kiosks. 2 fire towers at 8 on state land will get rehab. They're popular recreation destinations. They're not in great condition and not always safe. And then Smuggler's Notch Gateway in the Stowe side is getting parking enhancements, stormwater management. We've done some of this already, but continuing that work and improving recreation access.
So those towers, are they that they would now, they're going to be transferred to metal or what's?
They will stay, the main frame will stay the same, but like we'll replace the treads, we'll put some fencing along the sides so they're safer. Some of the upgrades need to happen because they're historic, so we got to meet historic preservation standards. Plus, they're not in the easiest locations to get materials to, so each of them costs about $500,000 to do the retro. So we're able to do 2. We still have 6 more to go. But people love them.
And where's the money coming from? Is it coming?
Economic Development Authority, federal dollars flowing through Agency of Commerce and Community Development. I think these were ARPA dollars, kind of through ARPA. They're not ARPA, but came through that sort of stimulus package to support tourism in the state, and they directed to outdoor recreation.
So did it come through VITA?
No, it
through economic development?
came from economic development at the federal level,
Oh,
and we're a
federal.
sub-recipient through ACCD.
I get it. Okay.
How large is the parking lot in Smuggler's Notch?
Well, there's several kind of cool-offs. We've made the cool-offs so that they are safer, for, there people walk along the road. Most of the parking lots are already built, so if you haven't gone there.
I'm up there all the time.
Yeah, so you
What I would say to you is, I'll be completely honest, I'm not a big fan of any of them. Because the more parking you put in the notch, in the busy times of year, the more people there are gonna be, and you're never going to have people not parking on the side of the road. So the more lots you put up there, the busier it's just gonna be. And I'm not sure that is what's best for the notch.
We work with the Lamoille County Regional Planning Commission who designed this. It's V-Trans, Forest Parks and Recreation, Green Mountain Club, and LPCP that has worked on this. And a lot of it was also with safety reasons and also stormwater management reasons.
I
Yeah. You know,
understand who you've worked with,
Yeah.
and you're just gonna have more people in the notch, and I'm not sure it's gonna be safer, with more parking spots, you've got more people walking in the roads.
We find out it's very difficult. We have a lot of people in many areas of our recreation, like high interest areas. What do? Do we meet the demand and build out? Some cases we do it because we have parking lots and the town roads are just people are parking on town road. We want to get them off the town road. Each situation is a little different.
So I think what Senator Westburn is talking about is avoiding the tragedy of the commons, where everybody wants to use a resource all the time and ultimately it destroys the resource. But I know, but this is a problem that goes on wherever you've got all these great activities and things. So
we really try to protect the resources, one of them, and then people management and safety.
Yeah.
I know you have to go soon, so I'll let you through whatever slide.
All right, then we have a couple federal awards. I mentioned the $5.5 million in Forest Service. That's meant for underserved landowners, helping them manage their forest land with resilience forestry strategies, payments to loggers, payments to foresters to develop plans, where hopefully that moves forward, and then funds for land acquisition, outdoor rec. Significant initiatives and challenges, things that we're working on. All three of our divisions have just recently released strategic plans, visions for the future. Forest Future Strategic Roadmap is all about the forest product sector that has been struggling. This is a plan for 10 years forward and how to create a thriving forest products economy going forward. 5 pillars. We got an implementation steering committee. This is very exciting work. It's needed work in the state. We're committed to this. Parks modernization study just launched last year. This is the 100th year of Vermont State Parks. We're celebrating until April. And 4 key things came out of this. One of them is that we want to be more accessible and inclusive in bringing people to Vermont State Parks. That includes ADA accessibility, language access. We also want to be more climate recognized, like the parks itself are impacted by climate change and extreme weather events. We have parks that were closed last year for the whole season, but we also need to be thinking about our own footprint. How do we staff? We bring a lot of seasonals on. We've seen that may not be the best. We may want to think about a better balance there. And the last one is, what is our long-term funding stream? Recognizing our costs are going up. We need to be thinking about dynamic pricing and other options. And then move forward together Vermont. We celebrated this year last week. This is all about outdoor recreation, huge economic engine in the state. We're actually number 2 nationally. 4.6% of our GDP is from outdoor recreation. So this is a strategy to think forward how we steward those, not only the trails, but the people, how to wellness for physical wellness, but mental wellness, and then also economic development are 3 pillars in that one. I'm going fast, okay? State lands planning and management is a huge body of work for us at FPR, but also broadly at A&R, Fish and Wildlife as well. A lot more people, a lot of different uses, and thinking about how do we manage to steward those into the future. The big area of us to be thinking about is also layer on that Act 59, which is thinking about how do we conserve for biodiversity and community protection, 30% by 2030 and 50% by 2050. We're heavily involved in that, what that looks like. Business office improvements, we've been focusing on this for years. If we don't have a thriving business office, we can't move all that money out, bring money in, buy all that toilet paper, all those things that we do. So with Ainsley's leadership, we've really built a business office that's exciting. And just thinking about these new state of Vermont enterprise systems coming out, BT buys, ERP, we're working on those. And then lastly, we not only do we try and support and respond and help communities and individuals impacted by extreme weather events, state lands have also been impacted. We have $6 million in infrastructure damages that we are responding to and working with FEMA on. To get to that.
That's good.
That is our happy to answer any questions, come back or.
And then
Yeah,
you have the ups and downs.
Does anyone, do you want me to review that and down just quickly?
Is
I think
there
we
any,
cover a good chunk of it throughout the presentation.
unless there's something that you think stands out that we should know about, or is it pretty straightforward?
It's pretty straightforward.
Regular increases for staff. And as you said, contracted services was a big,
Yes, we have a big increase in contracted services. So for forestry, that piece, the ACD, that enrolled the
Yeah.
wording for it is,
Well, it's the Economic Development Authority
Oh,
grant,
okay.
plus the Forest Service, $5.5 million. We're contracting out
okay.
pieces in
a
there,
good chunk
so.
of that, yes. You're seeing a really big increase in expenses there.
Okay, well, if we look through it and have any questions, well, you know how to get hold of you.
Thank you.
I'm not sure who has, is it Brendan?
No,
Norris?
no, Ann does, Ann does.
Oh, Ann does, yeah.
Wait a minute.
Oh, it's scary,
I
yeah.
got a knock now.
Yeah, Senator Watson is your
Okay.
contact.
Right, exactly, I can do that, yeah.
Okay, well, great,
Appreciate your time, and happy to stay in touch when I can need you.
thank you.
Thanks so much for having us.
Next, we have DEC. Fine.
Good to you.
Horse cars, doesn't that sound?
Yeah.
Maybe next time. Good afternoon, everyone. I think we're connecting. My name is Jason Batchelder. I'm DEC Commissioner. I've been before the committee a couple times in the past year, but nice to see those of you who I haven't met. Nice to see those of you who I have again. I'm joined on the screen today by Deputy Commissioner Neil Kim, who's the most recent past director of the Water Investment Division. He's responsible for the majority of the money that we'll talk about today. And I'll ask him to elaborate a little bit on some of the passing through that he does from Bill and IIJA. And I'm also joined by my business manager and director of Administration and Innovation Division, Kim McKee, who will take on the granular money questions that we have related to this. Good to go.
Good.
Great. So thanks. We've got a little bit of an agenda to start, and that'll be our second slide. So we have our organizational structure to go over, our budget overview, our DEC one-time investments, budget changes, position changes, significant initiatives and challenges, and then if we have time, we have our budget development form also, which we certainly can leave with you. Here's a snapshot of our organizational structure for familiarization. So we're broken out into three essential appropriations. One of them is the management and support services appropriation, which is my office, as well as aid, and as well as the state geologist who resides within the commissioner's office. That's Dr. Ben DeYoung. He's got a very small division, and I'll get into his specifics here in a second. We also have the Office of Waters and the Office of Air and Waste, which is Waste Management and Air Quality and Climate, as well as the Office of Waters, which is Water Investment, Watershed Management, and Drinking Water and Groundwater Protection Divisions. I'm going a little quickly because I see we have a half an hour. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. Our next slide is our budget overview, and you'll see here, a tremendous increase from last year and even bigger since 2023, as well as some downs there that are reflected in parentheses. I won't do as well of a job as Kim is explaining this, but I'll read you a few notes I have here first. So we're the largest budget within the agency, and if you spoke with Secretary Moore, I believe we're 2/3 of the money within the agency. Our huge budget is driven primarily by federal funds received through IIJA and bill. 2025, we're up from 209 to $245 million, and since 2023, we're up from $117 million to $245 million. So it's a lot, and all of that is driven by those federal funds. DEC's operations include several special funds, including the Environmental Permit Fund, where most of our environmental permit program fees are collected. The Environmental Contingency Fund, which pays for investigation and cleanup when there's no responsible party or there's an unresponsive party or a public health threat. We have built in a 3% general fund increase, and we're able to absorb pressures for FY26 using available special fund balances for increased salary.
So you were able to stay within the 3%, not including the federal funds?
Is that accurate to?
And the special.
We do have a decrease in operating and interdepartmental transfer funds, which you're seeing here, which is primarily due to a reduction in the department admin services allocation, in addition to some projects that have come to completion. Our next slide is a little bit of a granular look. Hopefully, the font isn't too small on the big screen. But this chart represents a breakdown of our budget across our 9 divisions. Largest blocks are within our 5 media divisions and our commissioner's office, where many of our internal service costs are administered. The Office of Waters, which I mentioned, is comprised of WID, the Water Investment Division, of which Neil is the former director. That directorship is not filled, but we have some promising candidates, and that hiring is about to close up. So we'll be able to rehire that. Very promising in the grand scheme of things in the current state of competitive job market. In addition, in the Waters Office of Waters is the Watershed Management Division, and also the Drinking Water and Groundwater Protection Divisions. You'll see there, worth mentioning the disparities in those budgetary numbers. Also of note is our Watershed Management Division has 100 employees, great big unit of individuals, and does a fantastic job with challenges like flood attenuation, river corridors, and all the other things that you would imagine go along with a watershed, lakes and ponds and rivers. The Air and Waste Appropriation includes the Waste Management and Prevention Division and the Air Quality and Climate Division. The Management and Support Services Division includes our office here, Administration and Innovation Division, and ECD, the Environmental Compliance Division, Vermont Geological Survey. So, as I mentioned, the state geologist lives within our division. He's been very busy lately with landslides, trying to predict, respond, and assist with buyouts. And also, I'd like to mention our ECD, our Environmental Compliance Division, because we're in a unique position in Vermont with our complex system of environmental laws. We also attempt to handhold and get people through that process of, say, a failed septic and funding, and what it looks like to be facing costs that outstrip your annual budget, and also be in violation at the same time. It's a very neat place to work for them, and they do a lot of fighting above their weight class there. Water Investment Division passes through significant state revolving loan fund dollars to support critical water and wastewater infrastructure, and has brought the recent large increases to the DEC budget. And in a few slides, I'll ask Neil to elaborate a little bit on his expertise with relationship to those federal dollars. This year, our Drinking Water and Groundwater Division takes second in the billing budget size due to the WIN grants, the water infrastructure improvements for the nation grants to small and underserved and disadvantaged communities. The Waste Management and Prevention Division also has considerable federal pass-through dollars for management of contaminated sites, and also a portion of this is Watershed Management Division, as I mentioned, is our largest division by FTE, 100 staff, whose budget has the largest slice of general fund. Any questions on that page before we move on?
Senator Norris.
If you've covered it already, great, but humor me a little bit. What's the little guy down on the lower right-hand corner?
That's geology. I apologize.
Geology, okay, I can't see
yes.
that. What else does it say?
Let me zoom in. I think
geology.
it just says geology division. Yeah,
Well,
and their budget. Yeah.
What are the other boxes? The other small boxes?
The smallest one on the right-hand corner.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
geology.
Geology.
Which is 93,000.
I couldn't see it.
593.
They were helpful last
Oh,
year.
is
weren't
it? So 593, sorry. So say that's very small. Get it done.
They can certainly do it. They have a small staff, but as you can imagine, all PhD scientists and have a wonderful web of colleagues at various universities and establishments around the state that they lean on heavily.
they? That's where the state geographer works.
Geologists.
They were 3 FTE, they just received a new position, limited service through JSC, they're now going to be 4 FTE.
What's the name?
593,000.
593,000, thank you. I have to stand closer.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Thinking next year, probably an arrow with that.
Whatever it takes.
We'll build to this. Sure. Let's see here. I think I inadvertently jumped on slide. Sorry. Okay. All right. So we're on to one-time investments, and in the way of CAPOs. So some of you have heard about the concentrated animal feeding operation draft CAPO corrective action plan that we are going back and forth with the EPA right now, committing us to inspect farms, issue permits to farms that discharge to surface waters, and enforce against farms that are discharging without a permit. Not quite as simple as that, and I won't be able to get too granular with you here. If we have the will or the time, I'd love to get a specialist in here to discuss this with you, or off camera sometime if any of you wish. It's a very complex system of laws, but we essentially are embracing this because we recognize, as well as the EPA and I believe the farmers, that existing under one enforcement entity is a way to streamline this process, clean water being a benefit. We're looking for $250,000 for implementation of a database for CAPO permitting. This would adjoin an existing ag database to serve both agencies. In addition, to get us up and running, $600,000 for contracted support. So basically, off the street hires to get us up and running while we build our unit of CAPO specialists. Get this going in a timely manner. So more one-time investments. So municipal wastewater connection design standards. This is a $50,000 ask to support development of a technical standards database. So these funds will be used to contract with an engineering firm to update technical standards and develop and design a manual for water and wastewater connections. A broad standardization for essentially bringing industry into a level playing field. Seems like a small ask, but we feel it will pay dividends in turnarounds and in standardization, but basically bringing that a fairness aspect to the challenges that they're seeing. These improvements will bring greater consistency and predictability to the permitting process and modernize the standards for water and wastewater connections. The next one is a big one. You certainly have all heard of PCBs and our effort to support schools in remediation. And this is essentially a $10 million ask. 500,000 of that would go to Department of Health and It's not education, I get them mixed up in the space.
Oh, education.
Education,
Yeah.
okay, that was my first instinct, I should have known. To support remediation, so essentially finishing what we started. We've tested, and now we are at a place where we need to finish up, what we've discovered or uncovered in the schools.
But you have a lot more to test.
We have quite a few more to test, that's correct.
So this is just the remediation measures that have been identified, or the schools that need remediation. Do you think that 9.52 would pay for all that remediation of the schools that have been tested?
Probably not. I think realistically, there will be some pains when we start to hit, like we did with North Country, just being as truthful as I possibly can. We uncover things that we just don't know when we enter these schools in a remediation setting. We will certainly do our best, as we've been doing. You won't find a more passionate group of individuals taking this on, but there are unforeseen costs that pop up almost without question.
Does DC have a official position on whether we should test the rest of the schools? Because we hear from some that we should test them.
I would defer to the secretary on that answer, not because because I simply want to speak with an agency voice here. I wouldn't want to step outside of the bounds of her broader picture in this.
Senator Norris?
Yes, this is an area I've heard a lot about. And correct me on this, what I'm hearing is the formula that's used at the state level versus the national level is just a wide discrepancy. Is it like 15 nanometers in the state of Vermont, the PCB rating, versus, I heard the federal government was like 600 nanometers?
Well, I think we can even take a step further back. We're the only program in the nation that is remediating PCBs in schools. And so our standards I'll get it wrong if I try to correct what you said. I believe we're at 20. But I think we can just say we've set the standard here in conjunction with the Department of Health. There's certainly disparities across the nation because some folks just aren't doing this work.
So do you know what the federal level is? Their
Can't
standard?
regurgitate it for you, but I can certainly get it for you.
But I'm hearing this from my constituents. 15 nanometers versus the federal level, 600 nanometers. So my question is, what's the driving force behind this kind of money for something that evidently the federal government doesn't even recognize at that level?
Sure, and this came up in, repeatedly, as we were going from school to school. And this is all public knowledge, people know.
Okay.
Our collective partnership with health and education saw a necessity at a lower level. And it was agreed upon, I won't pass any blame. Prior to my tenure, I don't know exactly what that number is and exactly what the disparity is, but when you're talking about parts per billion and parts per trillion, it's still very small. It's still very small, and something that they would not pursue if the risk was not there. And we see this as an extraordinary risk to our young people.
Anything you can supply on that, I'd be interested in.
I certainly can do that.
Thank you.
I think my assistant saw it, but if not, I'm just going to take a quick note if you do that. Give me just 1 second.
Senator Watson?
As an addendum to that, thinking about how, I appreciate you saying, that there's a link to the risk. And so, if it's accessible, if it's easy, thinking about like, it'd be great to have those, any kind of reference to like studies that are like, and at this level, we see this kind of risk in, does that make sense to?
It certainly does.
Peg, why the state's number is the state's number.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
And I think I won't speak for Dr. Levine, but I have seen him cornered on this, and he has very learned, very studied answers to this, and without being able to point to cancer clusters or autism clusters, or I won't speak anymore about clusters. I'm over my waders, but I think there are certainly answers that can certainly help you run them down. I think where we have arrived now is a place where the three departments are comfortable with and it's defensible.
Great.
Okay,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Commissioner?
Sir,
Yes, I've got the Department of Health's website up on that. I will go ahead and send that to the committee assistant so that the committee has that.
come on.
Good. Initiatives and challenges.
Great. So this is where I'll go through the list, and I'm going to ask Deputy Commissioner Cameron to speak about ARPA and Bill, and a little bit about reducing nutrient pollution to lakes and rivers if we have time. So you can see these 7 or 8 challenges, and ARPA and Bill, getting those through to the end are certainly top of the list. Managing PFAS in the environment, which is another contaminant that we have been dealing with for a long time, since 2016 in Bennington, and are actively managing in many parts of the state through groundwater and drinking water. PCBs in schools, which we mentioned, Flood Safety Act of 2024, and the CAPO permitting program, which we spoke about. So in addition to that, reducing nutrient pollution to lakes, rivers, and wetlands. I would just pause there and see if Neil wants to come on the screen and just talk for a minute about the federal pass-through money that he and his team manage.
Sure, I'd be happy to. I can very briefly tell you a little bit about American Rescue Plan Act water infrastructure support that the department has been implementing for a number of years now. I can also chat a little bit about the bipartisan infrastructure law funding that we have in place. Would like to let you know that there's unprecedented demand upon the state revolving loan funds to which those bipartisan infrastructure law funds flow. In response to the federal funding infusion, municipalities have really stepped up. I believe you all will likely have either read in Digger or your papers of record any number of bond votes that are moving at town meeting this very spring to support major water infrastructure projects. So our division, Water Investment Division, and our department administers those programs. Are there any specific, being mindful of time, I'll just ask if there's specific questions you all would like to ask about those federal funding programs?
No, only if there's specific, fine, unless some of the committee members have questions, or more just interested in the numbers, dollar numbers, that is. Norris.
Just a quick question. Lake Carmine, the only lake in crisis in Vermont. The aeration system has failed. They've said it's failed. I've heard everything from dredging to alum. Is that DEC's baby pot of whatever else?
It is.
And we don't have to do that here, but I just want to know what your thoughts were on this. What's moving forward in the future?
Sure. Moving forward, it's going to be an alum treatment, and I'm happy to ask Neil to take 10 seconds on that.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely, sir. You asked the right fella. I've been working in Lake Carmine for pretty much my entire career in state government. That goes back to 1990. We have, through the Clean Water Fund and through capital dollars, have assembled essentially, and the state revolving loan funds have assembled a funding package that is going to allow Lake Carmine to move forward with an alum treatment very, very likely this year. It is in permitting right now. We have the funding stack assembled for that project. And we've got the studies and the engineering to show that that is very, very likely to work. We were disappointed that the aeration didn't work. That was a bit of an experimental technology. It had some promise, but we did the right thing by doing the science and the monitoring along with the implementation to prove whether it was working or not. And when it clearly wasn't working, it was time to decommission that. So we're taking the pivot over to the alum treatment. And as I say, that's looking very promising for this year. I work extensively with those folks in Franklin.
Yeah, I do too. Not the whole, do you have like a fact sheet or something you could send the committee assistant that she could just simply print out and forward to me on this, something with bullet points on as to why the alum treatment, just something I have for talking point, shall we say.
I'll let Neil answer that,
Sir.
but we have quite a successful history with alum treatments in the state.
And it's not a permanent solution. You still have the problem of the nutrients entering the lake, so it's a temporary fix. Correct. Does something like
It
this
does last.
How long? Well, like, do you have to just keep doing it every 5 years?
Well, if I could jump in on that. So it's part of a two-step process, right? We do need to control nutrients in the watershed first. And as those nutrients come under control, then we have the likelihood that that alum treatment will have longevity that we're after. The engineering analysis that's been done shows a pretty good return on investment. I don't want to give you the number of years without digging it up on my computer. I did not bring that study up in front of me before our appearance, so I will be happy to send it to you, including, what we believe the longevity is, but it's good longevity. Lake Moray in Fairleigh, Vermont was treated in the early 1980s. That treatment lasted over 40 years before breaking down. We were able to fund a retreatment of Lake Moray this year using the similar funding stack as we're proposing for Lake Carmi. And that's a successful implementation that just happened. So I will get you that information. With respect, sir, to the watershed nutrient load, we also have done quite a bit of work through the Clean Water Initiative program to track implementation of water improvement projects in that watershed. And the numbers look good. We've achieved enough reduction that it is worth pursuing that alum treatment.
Thank you.
So I'm going to briefly touch on the next slide, which is key budget changes, but we have covered the majority of this in previous discussions, just in the previous 8 pages. So an explanation on the increase in bill, ongoing and other operational costs, including salary and benefits increase of 3.2 million across all base funding sources. And then the contractual cost net decrease, which I briefly touched on. Happy to go into that decrease a little bit further if you like.
Decrease of the internal service funds?
In addition to some projects that have ceased in operation, if I'm not mistaken.
Referring to contractual costs, our 9.9 increase from 25 to 26.
Yes.
Okay.
On to the next page.
Two new positions for the capital.
Yes, so we're on to the next page of key budget changes. So the Vail Lab, if you're not aware, had some unexpected increases in their sampling fees and operating costs. This $507,000 is reactionary to that. A decrease of $706,000 across all appropriations for our internal administrative services allocation and other minor adjustments. And then to establish 2 new CAFO positions, environmental analyst 6s, to support the CAFO program and getting that up to speed.
Do you know why that internal administrative services was a decrease? Because most people are saying it's increasing.
Yeah, and that's just a portion of the overall decrease described here. This fiscal year, we were able to pivot for central service positions onto our federal indirect cost pool as ballooned with our influx of federal economic recovery funds, that we can rely on that for this in the next few fiscal years to help ease the pressure on our administrative services allocation, which spreads costs from the management and support services appropriation onto our other 2 appropriations for our immediate divisions.
So in 2 or 3 years, we'll see it go back up. Probably.
You may have fee increases by then.
Right. Okay. And then this is the 2 positions, the 2 new positions.
Correct. And we're on to budget development. If you have time, I consider this the end of my slides, and then I turn it over to him if you wish.
Is there anything in particular in these ups and downs that you want to bring our attention to that would be kind of out of the ordinary, or very large increases or decreases that you haven't already touched on?
Nothing out of the ordinary. We have a slight increase in our temp budget this year to kind of right size costs that haven't been upwardly adjusted in the past few years for seasonal temp services that we bring on. would say we covered most of it.
Your vacancy savings is in a special fund, why is there not a general fund?
Sorry, would you mind repeating?
The vacancy savings,
Vacancy savings.
it's all under
Oh,
special
yes,
fund?
yes, all in, special and interdepartmental, refers to likely the admin services costs, which are charged to the
Oh, now
interdepartmental.
that gets it to, in this, since it's in that, that's a special fund, the internal service fund.
That's in interdepartmental. Yes, but we did increase our vacancy savings this year from 625,000 to 1,050,000 to reflect our actual vacancy rates we've been seeing due to retention and recruitment challenges.
I don't see anything that jumps out at me here. You're using more space at National Life? Or did they just increase your rent?
They increased our rent slightly.
So I would assume you're using less space. Or did, since the remote workers? Or did you never really shrink? You just have a lot of empty desks?
I generally understand we've the same amount of space on a hoteling system, for most staff, but we are in, the 5th year of a 10-year lease with National Life.
Okay. So that even if you could shrink, you could
Right.
reduce your lease space.
And turn off some lights.
Well, that's good.
But I understand that agencies, been able to reevaluate and reduce them. I'm not my name, but
Okay.
the agency is looking at that overall National Life. We don't have flexibility.
Okay. Well, I assume this is also Senator Watson's part of the budget, is that right? If there's
What are you
anything
talking?
out of the ordinary, show us now.
I was gonna say, I have lots of questions, but some of them are not even just budgetary related, so anyway, I'm looking forward to having those.
Please reach out anytime. I should do the same.
Okay, well, great. Well, thanks for the time.
Thanks for having us very much. Thank you, Neil. Thank you, John.
All right, very good. Have a great day, folks.
Likewise.
Senator Norris, I am putting that information together for you right now. I'll send it off.
Thank you, sir, I appreciate that.
We're gonna hear from the auditor. Copper.
Sure.
Good question.
Yeah.
I wish I could tell
I didn't hear that.
you. He's got 3 screens and mine doesn't work.
I'm sorry.
So I apologize for the tardy
Do it again.
meeting, I want to share the cannabis control board.
I know, well, people are wondering.
I wasn't here for it,
You're always
right?
here early, so when you're here late, people got worried. But you're ready to send out a search party.
That's it, judiciary.
Judiciary is important.
Mr. Auditor, we're just doing a transition here.
Sure, because I'll ask you
You
today.
should grab that opportunity.
I'm on it.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
Are you coming in?
Are y'all taking a break?
Nope.
No. I've seen offers.
All right, we're back settled and ready to switch gears to the auditor's office. We have the auditor with us on the screen. Do you know everybody on the committee this year or those that are here?
You know, thank you for asking. I may have met your 2 new members, to my knowledge, Senators Brennan and Norris, when they were in the House, but I can't recall. So congratulations and welcome.
Thank you.
And Brennan stepped out, so he's not here, and then the pro tem isn't here right now either, so.
Actually, I think we met a couple times when I was in Gov office last year.
Oh, yeah.
Same.
Yeah, same.
Right. Yeah, you're probably go ops quite a bit.
Yeah.
And
Okay,
if
well-
memory serves, Pro Tem is often not there anyway, at least
Yeah,
mine.
the right. Yeah.
Well, she is today. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
Oh, hey.
I'm here today.
Yes.
Temporary.
Center Lines is a temporary pro
I'm the
tem for
temporary
the
pro tem for the day.
day. Okay, well, we'll
Well,
let you, take it away.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. There's very little that's changed in our budget. And I remember the very first time I went to visit your colleagues in House Approps back in 2013. And I followed Mark Larson, who at the time was I think, deputy in AHS. And it occurred to me that they spend in one day what we spend in a year. Particularly when you look at our general fund allocation, which is about $400,000, because as most of you should know, or if you don't, I'll share with you, we have an internal service fund, which is about 90% of our budget. And that fund reflects a formula developed over the years, changed a few times with both finance and management, and because of the single audit, had to be adjusted for the Office of Management and Budget, which is getting a lot of ink these days in Washington. So 90% the internal service fund, about 8% from the general fund, and a little over 1% from something called the special fund, which first arose in the midst of history. Nobody's quite sure why. Beth Pierce tried to make it go away, poor thing, because it comes out of her budget. And I think it's related to the audit work that is related to the treasurer's office, which has so many tentacles and a lot of money. But everybody's pretty much agreed to ignore it. It's $53,000 a year, so I don't think it's really worth your time. So that's it. I mean, that's about the whole thing. We met the governor's budget target this year. The only things that changed that were more than a couple pennies were the Pay Act, of course, and CLA, which replaced KPMG a few years ago at my suggestion. I mean, we went through an RFP, of course. Their contract has gone up a little bit, not much really. It's really rather nice of them. But they also have taken over something that used to be done by a local firm, McSorley McCoy up in Burlington. They did all the sheriff's audits. And they decided after getting too much press, because auditors don't generally like to be in the media, and after the Franklin County, and I mean, there are 3 or 4 counties, as you know, that just had some issues. They said, we're done. We can't do this anymore. And I think it was a lost leader for them anyway. So they stepped aside. We went out for an RFP, and not one Vermont firm responded favorably. I mean, Tim, my deputy, worked hard to really, drum up some interest. It's not a lot, but there's 14 sheriffs, so you do them every other year. So it's a few bucks. Nobody wanted to touch it. So CLA, which is our audit firm that does the ACFR, the audit of the financial statements, and the single audit, said, well, we can do that. So they're doing it for us, thankfully, and they're very good at their work, but it's a little more money than it used to be. So other than those 2 things, there's virtually no change in our budget.
Yeah. He also printed out this
Yeah.
whole.
That whole thing.
No, that was after January of 2019, correct, Mr. Auditor?
The problems of Franklin County,
Problems of
they got better after 2019, is that what you're saying?
I can't say they got better. What happened is they made it challenging to do the audit. And if you don't have sufficient evidence, then really an auditor has to walk away, and that's exactly what McSorley McCoy did.
Wow.
And you do the audits every year?
Every other year.
Every other year, which is a question you guys could revisit. There are some sheriffs, as you know, that are much smaller in scope. They may cover a large area like in the Northeast Kingdom, but they don't have a lot of resources. And it used to be that these audits were very inexpensive because, as I say, I think McSorley was treating them like a lost leader. But now they're 3 times as much. They're up to 20 grand every couple of years. And, it used to be split 3 ways, oddly, between the administration, the sheriffs, and my office. Who knew how we got into the mix? But now it's basically the sheriffs and the administration. So it's more than pocket change. Some audit shops can handle it without any problem. And I can say that I think it's appropriate that it be done, not because I'm concerned about corruption, just because with turnover, especially, there are changes in the business office of the sheriffs, and they sometimes can learn from what the audits tell them. So it's challenging, but thankfully, that's not something my office has to do.
In this, we have a printout, like a, sort of like the budget development sheet, but it looks a little different. But it says, as this state fiscal year 25 has passed, but are those the changes from 25?
Did it not print the whole document?
Hmm.
Because it shows the up and downs, which is, I think, what you guys like. But if it's not printed, it might need to be in landscape. I'm not sure, as opposed to portrait. But the up
Well,
and
it just says
downs
at
are.
the top, it says as fiscal year 25 is top, as passed, when you, on the columns that have the numbers.
Yeah, there are two sets of columns to the right of that in the original document, and I apologize if it didn't print properly. The up and downs are, very small. The general fund up and down is less than $25,000.
Yeah, it's 20, so yeah, we have to, well, I assume that this is the total.
If you need more documentation, I'm happy to get it to you after we speak today.
I'm just wondering, yeah, it could just be a heading problem. Because it says S fiscal year 26 on one side and 25 on the other side.
It's true.
I guess these are the numbers, these are the ups and downs.
Okay.
Very colorful. You've got all the colors in the rainbow in here.
You have color printing. Jeez, you guys are.
Yeah, we're getting, don't tell the auditor. We're spending money on color and ink. And then we also have your performance report, which is like you're in the office's annual report of the work you've done, basically.
Correct. There are some things that are beyond our control, as I think you all know. If we make recommendations to an auditee, to an agency or department, we can't compel them to adopt our recommendations. Nevertheless, we do follow up both the next year and then 2 more years out to see the extent to which they have implemented our recommendations. Sometimes they're good about it and sometimes not so good.
Well, Senator Westman has your budget, and I know he'll want to come over to your office and go over your books in detail.
Well, we have no office.
Well,
Our building has
Make
been.
an appointment with your deputy.
Our office has been closed for 1.5 years because of the flooding in 23.
Did any update on whether you're gonna get an office or?
No one has called me. I think, to be honest, I think they have a longer term problem, and that is what to do with the 3 older properties on State Street across from the tax department, including my building. The Secretary of State's office benefited from as those of you who've been around, a massive improvement project back 10 years ago or so, and withstood the flooding pretty well. And I'm happy for them because it's a great old building. I'd like to think they'll keep my building and the one next to it and the one that's the arts folks and humanities, because they add a lot of character to State Street. But I know there's some people on the 5th floor who are wondering, does that make sense? I think it does.
So 16 staff at the auditor's office work from home, are all remote.
Correct. They were concerned about it at first. I mean, I worked at home for 19 years before I was first elected, and I have an office and it's very comfortable and I'm productive. But the people who never had were concerned, particularly those with kids.
Yeah.
And I can appreciate that. But they've all adjusted and they all prefer it, to be honest.
Okay. So you save any money, or are they still charging you rent?
BGS is usually behind about 2 years in charging us rent. So I don't know where it stands, but I think they let us off the hook on 132, the main building, but we were renting some additional space down at 110, which is on the market, if I understand that correctly. Annie Noonan, back to sheriffs, is down there. So yeah, no, I think they're giving us a break. I hope so.
Yeah. Okay.
No fee for space.
Yeah, well, if they don't have any space.
That's what I'm saying. negative fee for space, they're paying them.
Okay, any other questions for the auditor?
No, it's good, thank you.
You're
Give
very
our
welcome.
Give our regards to the deputy auditor.
I most certainly will. Thank you so much. Take care.
Great, thanks. Okay, now we're gonna have Wendy at 2:30, so we get a break.